Hope everybody can see what I am presenting. If you have any problem, please use the chat box. I will try to be prompt in answering that as far as possible without interrupting the others' flow. Shall we start our afternoon session? As afternoons go, it's a bit of a problem, especially after a hearty lunch, as everybody knows. And the topic today we are discussing about will be about the diffusion and growth of technology. In fact, the way I am handling this class itself is a progress in technology. As you all now have become accustomed to classes on online, which hardly 6 months back was a luxury for most of us, is now the sine qua non. So let us start our discussion about growth of technology and the way it diffuses. Before I start my actual discussion, for any discussion we start with a lot of questions. Here too we have a number of questions. A few questions that I would like to share with you all, which I have taken from Scott Shane's editor's introduction to Handbook of Technology and Innovation Management, are these. How does technological change affect industry evolution? Why do industries experience high rates of firm entry followed by a shakeout? Another question would be, how should firms manage product adoption and diffusion? Why does the shape and timing of adoption and diffusion vary across products and services? A few more questions are there, like why do some tools predict customer needs more efficiently than others? Where do entrepreneurial opportunities come from, etc., etc. But if you look at all these questions, what you will find is that they all deal with technological advancements or changes. And we will be discussing about technological changes and the way it actually changes our life. So today we will be dealing with some of these themes. The two primary themes we will be discussing today are the growth of technology and technology diffusion. Growth of technology, we will be looking at the drivers, and as academics, we are all interested in modeling these. And in technology diffusion, there are a number of perspectives we can have, and also we have to have some theoretical background to understand and to explain technological diffusion processes. And we will also have a glance at bridging the theory and practice of technology and innovation management, which I will carry on tomorrow morning, the first session also. So let us see. As in the morning, I understand Basi sir has already explained to you about technology. Now, what is technological progress? It is improvements in techniques, including firm organization, by which goods and services are produced, marketed, and brought to market. That is at the heart of human progress and development.
Dr. Vinod, are you using slides?
Yes.
They are not visible. They are not visible.
I was presenting, sir. Oh, I see.
Basi sir, it is visible. I think you will have to pin the screen. So there will be two profiles of Vinod sir. You will have to pin the screen wherein he's making a presentation.
Ritesh sir, it is visible?
Yeah, it is visible, sir. It is visible.
Okay. Hope everybody else is able to see the slides. Okay. Shall I carry on, Ritesh sir?
Please
yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
Thank you. And if you look at a dictionary, what would you find? Technology is the study and knowledge of the practical, especially industrial use of scientific discoveries. Please keep that in mind when we move on. And what is technology growth? Technological growth is derived out of inventions and innovations. It can be either through substitution or diffusion. And technology develops out of continuous or discontinuous developments. These two statements are a bit confusing. I'm saying that it can be continuous, it can be discontinuous. and it can be either through substitution or through diffusion. Let us try to understand how these can happen. The first premise is that technologies should have some kind of inventions to base them upon. You first have some kind of invention or discovery. You have the practical side coming in when you innovate. You have the new technology coming into play. I have a small question. Suppose I invent an electronic chip that will add more brain to our brains. Will it be an innovation or an invention? Please keep in mind, we will have a look at it later. And what kind of technology element is involved in such developments? Let us move on. Now, innovation is something we have to first understand if we want to understand technological growth. And innovation is a process by which new ideas are successfully exploited to create economic, social, and environmental value. As far as we are concerned as technology managers, we are very much bothered by the economic, social, and environmental values. Without these, no real-world innovation can happen. And for many companies, I'm quoting from Wilby, for many companies, skillful marketing has replaced innovation. It's cheaper and less risky to convince customers something is groundbreaking, even if it isn't, than develop something truly innovative. That is the other side of it. Nowadays, with all the technology around us, we are many times fooled into believe that there are innovations where nothing is actually there. We should then keep that also in mind. And another aspect we should keep in mind when we think about technology is that for us, technology manifests through artifacts. An iPhone, for example, is a technology artifact, and through the knowledge of that particular technology. For example, mobile telephony, which links iPhone to the real world, is the knowledge behind that. When knowledge and artifacts come in together, you have hierarchies coming. And technology has hierarchies that becomes apparent through the different perspectives we have. Now, another question I have. Even some time back, we all used to have something called mail order. You could shop online, not exactly online through the internet, but you could order things over the post and get it delivered at your home. And we all used to write to our pen pals in America, Britain, or whatever. So, what is the difference in doing these and between e-commerce and email? Is there any innovation coming in there? Please keep that also in mind. And before we move further, we should try to understand something called technology life cycle. Probably most of you are already familiar with these things, but for those who are unfamiliar or who will want some recap, let us look at these curves. What do they represent? Now, when technology develops, what happens at the initial stage? I had said that invention is at the base of technological growth. Now, when you have an invention, do it directly produce commercial gains? Very rarely. For example, you will all have heard of MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. Did it start like a scanner at the outset itself? No way. It was an esoteric area of research, a GE. Then later on, it was put to good use in medical technology, and then it came to be firmly established. So in the initial stage, what you have at the R&D stage, the research and development stage, the commercial gains are not there. Actually, it will be negative. Once it moves on, you will have a lot of technologies coming in. I have shown just two. You will see that one of the technologies has a curve only up to here. Because once you do research, you will find that some of them are not commercially viable. And firms do not like to pursue research just for the sake of research. So what will happen? It is dropped. But some may have commercial viability. They will work upon it, improve it, come out with some new product, and you start having commercial gains. Will it go on and on? No way. You have a growth stage. Then you have a maturity stage. And like all things on earth, sadly, there will be a decline stage. But with medical field doing wonders in human extension of life, here also in technology, you can have extended life for certain innovations or innovations. So you have a technology life cycle like this, where you have the initial embryonic stage, followed by a growth stage, maturity stage, a decline or an extension, depends on the kind of technology you are playing with. And if you take the perspective of technological growth, let us, for example, take the case of downloadable music. How many had heard of downloadable music, say, 20 years back? Not many, I think. But from the point of view of a music lover, it is really a very pleasurable innovation to have music downloadable at your fingertips. But from the perspective of the companies or the firms that actually used to produce the CDs, or even before that the cassettes, or even before that the long playing records, it was actually a death knell. They were actually faced with something which was destroying an industry, till something called digital copyright enforcement came along. So your intellectual property rights is also catching up fast. And technological growth has as one driver the enabling environment. Here the IPR regime and the regulatory controls enter the picture. So technological growth is not totally removed from the environment. And in technological development, one of the presuppositions is that there should be a need or demand for technology. Some of you will have questions on that. We will tackle it a bit later. Now, the second premise is that meeting the need by harnessing the knowledge from basic sciences should be possible. And the third premise is that it should be possible and able to convert the knowledge component into engineering solutions satisfying economic constraints. Please look at the wording. You have to convert the knowledge component into engineering solutions. And you have to keep in mind the economics of it all. Real world cannot actually be without the economics. And engineering actually provides the real world conversion to the knowledge. So this is actually how you grow technologies out of inventions. Now, some of the defining moments in technology growth we should all be familiar with right from our school days. For example, we have all learned that Industrial Revolution came into being because of steam engines. And it was accelerated with the advent of electricity in the end 1800s or the early 1900s. Then came along another big revolution, long distance voice communication. Another big change which has considerably influenced technology growth at a global level is the World War II. Probably you will have some questions on that. Actually, World War II was one of the guiding lights for many of the technology developments we are even now developing further. Because there was a concerted effort, although it was not all for the good, there was a big concerted effort on such a large scale which was unheard of and which was compressed into 10 or 5 years. And within that time, a lot of developments were actually forced out of the technological infrastructure available at that time, which was going to change the world forever. Then came along the computers, which started in the 1940s, but which picked up the momentum in the 1960s, 70s, and so on. Now, in the 1950s and 60s, a big technological shift was happening with the advent of manned space exploration. And in the 1990s and 2000s, we are seeing that long-distance computer networks are defining the way technology is going to proceed further in its growth curve. Actually, we are all able to see each other and convey to each other through these medium just because of such reliable long-distance computer networks. You should keep in mind that 25 years back or 30 years back, we were still in the era of trunk booking. I still remember when I was in school in the early 1980s. If you wanted to call somebody in Bombay or Delhi, or for that matter, anywhere outside, say 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers, you had to book a trunk call. Just imagine. Nowadays, do we bother with such kinds of things? So that is the way technology has shifted. And as we have just seen, it makes clear that time and cyclic changes in technology are always brought together. Those who have read something of the history of S&T would have heard of or would have used the words technology paradigms, technology revolutions, etc. Just like such terms, from economics, we have the Kondratiev cycles, which are actually based upon technological innovations that bundle together in a particular place and time to set the stage for steady development and diffusion outwards until a new bundle of innovations comes along and supersedes the first. I have quoted from Howey's Enigma of Capital. Please read that sentence once more. It's very clear. The Kondratiev cycles are based upon technological innovations that bundle together in a particular place and time to set the stage for steady development and diffusion outwards until a new bundle of innovations comes along and supersedes the first. So it is directly pointing to the replacement of old technologies. So we have already the theoretical background for TLC, that is the technology life cycle, in place. And if you look at innovation as distinct from invention or a technological prototype, it refers to technology actually being used or applied for the first time. Mind you, for the first time. Process of innovation is viewed for simplicity in making comparisons as occurring in three phases. I have taken Atterback's paper, which is one of the defining papers in this area, early on. The first stage or the first phase is the generation of an idea. Second one is problem solving or development. And the third one, the implementation of diffusion. Now, as researchers, we are all aware of deterministic attitudes. One of the early ways in which this was tackled was exactly this. We can see that determinism in action in some of the models we have here. One way is technology can be a fix-all. You would have all heard about genetically modified crops, for example. At the time they were put in front of the world, they were held up as a fix-all for all kinds of problems in agriculture. What is the status now? Many countries have actually banned genetically modified crops. Not many countries, actually, some of the leading industrialized countries. What has happened there? So, is technology a fix-all? Actually, determinism will like us to have that technology can fix anything with progress. Now, two common models of technology drivers are put up as a result of such deterministic models. That is technology push or research push and market pull or demand pull. They were considered as the basic drivers of technology early on. So what is technology push? A technology is actually searching for an application. You do a lot of R&D, you have a production coming in of the product, the marketing and sales people do their bit, it is sent to the consumers. So the R&D is focused on the technology being developed into an application at the hand of consumers. So you are pushing the technology to the consumer. The other way is thinking about the market pull, that is the industry response to observed market demand. You have the consumer demanding something, he or she is already using certain things, and something else is wanted or something in addition to that is wanted. So there is a feedback which is carried back to the research and development stage. You run through the production, marketing and sales and all those things, and then you come up with new technologies which are actually implemented in applications, which again goes back to the consumer. Now, the innovation models have further developed from this technology push, market pull kind of thing. And the third generation model we have is something like this. You have on the one side the science and technology push is happening, and on the other side you have a big market of consumers, and you have an independent communication and feedback loop between these things. And at the firm level, you have R&D, design, prototyping, testing, etc., followed by the operations, finally the marketing, sales, and service. So this is the third generation innovation model. This is another way of looking at innovations. But as you would understand, this again doesn't cover all aspects of technological growth. Now, the fourth generation innovation model is actually looking at parallel development and integration, because no firm can just focus on one technology and move on, because the market is not going to wait for you to develop just one technology or one product. So you have a lot of other entities coming into the picture here. The suppliers are anyway there. Then you have a lot of cross-functional teams working on all these things. Look at the way the perspective has now changed. It is not some esoteric lab alone. You have cross-functional teams coming into play, and even the organization itself is changing the way it is looking at things. You are having a process-based organization. Those familiar with TQM will recognize some of the familiarities here also, continuous improvement, etc. So this is the fourth generation innovation model, which can again be used to explain a lot of shifts in technology, which has happened, mind you, which has happened, because nowadays even this is not enough. Now, the fifth generation innovation model is actually looking at innovations from a strategic point of view. Not that none of the other models were looking at it from not from a strategy point of view, but the importance of strategy in this fifth generation innovation model is considerably higher. And you have a high level of technology and organizational integration coming into play in these generation models. SMT is acting on one side, you have the market pressures acting on the other side, and you have a very nice innovation strategy in place. Look at all the new players in the technology landscape. You will find that they are actually playing something like this. And there is a close technological and strategic integration with customers, suppliers, and innovation communities. The last thing is especially important, because earlier on, many of the firms were not looking at innovation communities. We will have something to say about it later on also. So innovations are central to the growth of technology is one of the basic premises on which we are working on. And if you take from Norman and Burgundy's view, incremental innovations are like climbing a hill blindfolded. When you feel there cannot be any change in height, you stop. But you have another problem here. What about radical innovations? For example, if you look at Facebook or Twitter or like that, any of the new technology companies, the way they have come out is not by climbing the usual small hills. So how can you actually tackle the way they have approached such innovations? Just to see how they have done it, we enable others to follow such examples. Is it possible? So have a look at the paper also. I have mentioned that paper. Now, another view is that, which has gained considerable acceptance now, is market driving innovation model. Now, many of the firms are constantly told to become more market driven. Now, in one of the studies, I'm quoting from Kumar et al., our study of 25 pioneering companies, Body Shop, IKEA, Tetra Pak, whose success has been based on radical business innovation, indicates that such companies are better described as market driving. Please understand, it is not market driven, it is market driving. While market driven processes are excellent in generating incremental innovation, they rarely produce the type of radical innovation which underlies market driving companies. If you look at the names they have mentioned, they have a long list of names. You just go to this paper and go through it. You will find that they have actually defined the markets, not the other way around. traditionally it is the market which is supposed to drive. If you remember about the first models, we were also thinking about the feedbacks and things like that. So market driving companies who are generally new entrants into an industry gain a more sustainable competitive advantage, which is actually what every firm is looking at. They try to generate sustainable competitive advantage to exist, to continue to exist. And this is done by delivering a leap in customer value through a unique business system. If you look at any of these companies, you will find that their business systems are unique. For example, IKEA is famous for the way they have actually changed how furniture is to be sold. Like that, all the companies which are listed in this path directors. One more thing is, market driving strategies always entail high risk, but also offer a firm the potential to revolutionize an industry and reap vast rewards. So the higher the risk, the bigger the rewards. Now, with all this, we are now entering the question of disruptive innovation. Now, I have a question to you all. Innovation is something you come out with which is not there earlier, so everything should be disruptive. The issue is that, suppose I come up with a 360. Excuse me. Excuse me, somebody is asking any question?
It's an interruption. It is an interruption. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. So a laptop which is 360-degree foldable, nowadays it's available, is it actually going to disrupt anything? I don't think so. Now, coming out with a high-yielding rice variety, again, our agricultural scientists are coming out with a lot of innovations. So this high-yielding rice variety, can it be actually termed a disruptive innovation? I don't know. It's not actually, I don't know. I don't think so. Do you think it can be disruptive? But let us take the case of WhatsApp. Is it disruptive? It is disruptive or not? Can somebody say?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So I have one response that is disruptive. We will see whether it is disruptive at the end of this session. Now, one of the books I always delight in reading in is Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma. And there he has discussed disruptive technology, which he has changed later on as disruptive innovations. Because for him, technology is not disruptive. Technology in relation to an incumbent's business model is. So that is how there is a change in disruptive technology and disruptive innovation. Now, let me quote from Scott Sheen again. Most industries go through systematic phases. They initially display a wide variety of technological approaches and products, and firms focus on product innovation. This can eventually lead to the emergence of a dominant design, after which innovation becomes incremental and more focused on process improvements. Now you will understand, we were focusing on product innovations earlier. Here, another term has entered the picture, process improvements or process innovation. And another term is dominant design. So most technological discontinuities are brought to the market by new companies or companies moving into industry from other industries, and the performance of incumbent firms in response to this change depends on the degree to which the technology undermines the value of their existing assets, their relationships to other firms, and the timing of the change. A lot of important things are said here. Now, when we look at product innovation, process innovation, dominant design, etc., another curve comes into mind. Look at the innovation rates. What is happening? You have a technology which is actually shifting because of the change in the innovations. And on the way, what happens is some dominant design comes into being, which predominates everything else. After that, that is supposed to be one of the pinnacles of innovation at the time. And what will happen at the way this is being produced, this is the process innovation. It is slightly lagging behind this product innovation curve. And once the dominant design happens, the focus is now more on the process improvements. And what happens later is you have a process innovation peak coming into play. So you have an emergent stage where both these curves are slightly offset, not slightly, it is quite offset. Then you have a shakeout stage where industries are actually turned around by the technologies they handle with. And then you have a mature stage. Now, innovation is not just limited to products. Processes which are run to produce these also change because of innovations in products. For example, look at the way we are now buying half-cooked chapatis or pre-cooked Indian food with shelf life. You're actually seeing process innovations, not just product innovation. Now, what about Walkman? We all were using Walkmans earlier. I don't know about the new people, but most of us will be quite familiar with Walkmans. What about iPod? Is it actually product innovation alone, or has process innovation does process innovation come into the picture? If you look at it closely, there is an element of process innovation also. Now, if we try to understand, the more we know about how to do something, the harder it is to learn to do it differently. Again, I have quoted from Kaplan's The Concept of Inquiry. And researchers should investigate the broader context in which an innovation diffuses, such as how the initial decision is made that innovation should be diffused to members of a system, how public policies affect the rate of diffusion, how the innovation of studies related to other innovations, how it was decided to conduct the R&D that led to the innovation in the first place, etc. And if you look at growth of technology and production, from the economist approach, you have something called factor substitution coming into play. Without getting into all the details of the economics, which will be taken later by authorities in that field, we understand one thing. As technologies change, you have factor substitution coming into play. For example, the technology employed by EID Parry to produce sugar in bulk is not the technology of producing crystalline sugar by artisanal producers. The factors of labor and capital differ by many magnitudes because one is a very big industry, the other is artisanal production. And in both cases, because of the difference in the technology employed. But it doesn't mean one technology is always the best. This is just a graphical way of showing things, how technology can affect your production functions. And again, we always say something about high tech, low tech. So actually, how do you come up with such divisions? I have a small video. Let us see that video in action. It is about making the ordinary cups and saucers we all use. I hope you are able to see this video.
Yes, sir.
Yes, video is good.
However, the audio is not.
This is about clay mining. So it was about a very ordinary thing. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You're audible. You're audible.
Okay. Right. So it was about a very simple thing, that is making ceramic cups and mugs. So when we think about such small things, do we imagine about the technology behind it? What kind of technology it uses? You should remember we had said something about factor substitution also. Now, when you were looking at that video, you would have found that the kind of operations involved are actually technologically intensive. It is not the same as the old potter's wheel and clay. So what happens when technology enters the picture? A lot of factors change. That is, it becomes capital intensive. Usually, it so happens that labor decreases and you have substitution coming in. So if you were needing hundreds of potters to produce all these things earlier, with all these technologies coming in, you can now come up with a lot of products, a lot of different types of products, and at faster paces. So it was a very simple thing about factor substitution in action. Now, let me move on to another aspect. We were saying something about the technological growth and the innovation models. Now comes the stage of diffusion. Again, if you look at the word diffuse, it is to spread in many directions. For example, we say that television is a powerful means of diffusing knowledge. Now, diffusion model is a conceptual paradigm applicable across many disciplines. And here we are interested in technology diffusion. And we should try to understand how organizations can harness the spread of an idea because of the economics involved in it. And diffusion of innovation is actually not new. It developed as a theory in the 1960s. And diffusion is a process by which an innovation is communicated through certain channels over time among the members of a social system. And it is a special type of communication in that the messages are concerned with new ideas. Please have a look at that. It is about the messages being concerned with new ideas. And diffusion is also a kind of social change defined as the process by which alteration occurs in the structure and function of a social system. When new ideas are invented, diffused, and are adopted or rejected, leading to certain consequences, social change occurs. And diffusion is the process of closing the gap between what people do not know and what they can effectively put to use. So that is the contribution of diffusion as far as technology is concerned. That is, diffusion is a process of closing the gap between what people do not know and what they can effectively put to use. So it is about usability also. And I quote from the father of this discipline, that is Everett M. Rogers. One reason why there is so much interest in the diffusion of innovations is because getting a new idea adopted, even when it has obvious advantages, is often very difficult. There is a wide gap in many fields between what is known and what is actually put into use. A small exercise, I will ask all of you to participate in this. We all are really interested in technology, and probably communication is one of the weak areas for many of us. Now you are asked to list 2 technologies which you are familiar with and use on a almost daily basis. But one should be something you use a lot, but you have no idea of the evolution of the technology. That is, you don't know much about the technology behind that, but you use that particular product or the artifact quite regularly. And another technology which you should list is that which you use very sparingly, but which you know quite a lot about. So please list it out. I will ask about it later on. I hope everybody has noticed what is required. Shall I move on? Hello?
Sir. Yes, sir. Please proceed, sir.
Are the participants not responding, or they don't have any interest in this? Because when I ask some responses, nobody is actually responding. Yeah. In the morning, I think Basu sir has already told you something about the S curves, but it is essential in studying technology diffusion. Now, if you look at the performance parameter and the time or engineering effort, you will come up with a curve which is theoretically modeled as an S curve. And there are a number of S curves. For example, one S curve is the development of one technology. You have the initial growth after the invention and innovation stage, that is the embryo stage. It moves on to maturity stage. And once it starts declining, that is, there you actually reach a physical limit. For example, you look at the storage. Earlier, computer memory storage, you had to think about your floppy disk. We all used to work with those things, the big ones, which hardly used to store kilobytes. Nobody nowadays thinks about kilobyte memories. Now you have your hard disk drives coming up with terabytes. Just imagine. So the physical limit is actually changing, means the technologies are also changing, the performance is actually changing. So what you have is another technology shift happening here. Another technology comes into play, and another. And overall, when you look at that particular industry, you see a particular growth curve, which is always surpassing the limits. Those in the electronics domain will have heard of Moore's law. Anyway, another thing is that this is also connected to the value system in place, because firms actually work with values. I will explain that a bit more in the later stages. Now, when you study the S curve, many empirical studies of diffusion have observed a time path of adoption which resembles an S curve. If you actually study an adoption curve, you will come up with what is similar to our S curve. Now, the slow period of early take-up is followed by a phase of rapid adoption and then a gradual approach to satiation. That is, the rate of diffusion first rises and then falls over time. So that is why you have an initial surge and then you have a stabilizing effect coming into play. And if you look at the different kinds of models of this S curve, because as academics, we are also interested in modeling these things. By far and away, the most popular account of the S curve is based on the premise that the adoption of a new technology is limited by the diffusion of information about it. Information about that particular technology is actually a limiting factor. This is one way in which you can model. And another way of modeling it is through probit models, where the idea is that each potential user has its own valuation of the new technology, giving some incentive to adopt before others. That is, each user has their own particular incentive in choosing that particular technology. And costs should be looked into in such models. The cost can be learning costs, search costs, that is technology search costs, switching costs. Because once you shift technologies, you have to expend some money on that. Because firms cannot shift technology just the other day around. Every day they cannot shift. And there will always be opportunity costs involved. And another third model, which looks at stages of S curve, is actually an initial period in which the rate of adoption rises, followed by a period in which it falls. It is legitimation, and which is followed by the second phase is actually a competition stage. So this is another way of looking at it. And Jarowski's paper, a bit old, but it is a very good paper. It again highlights another model of the process by which technology first arrives in the market. The point here is that new technologies generally come in a number of variants, and early adopters effectively choose between different variants. Now, the choice process is both costly and risky, and as a consequence, it inhibits adoption, particularly when network externalities are present. So this is another way of modeling the S curve. Now, when you have radical innovations coming in, that is disruptive technologies or disruptive innovations coming in, what happens? Actually, disruptive technologies may not be performing well in the initial stages. You look at this. In the common applications, one technology is already doing very well. If you try to look at the disruptive technologies coming up at that stage, you will find that their performance is not at all good compared to the existing technology. But once time moves on, what happens is it all captures up with this particular technology at a higher level and replaces this particular technology. So that is the disruption happening. The way technology is actually seen as technology waves is based on these concepts. If you look at the time and the shift in technologies, you will find that over the years, what has happened is you have a number of technology waves coming into play. Now we are in this particular crest. Earlier, we had all these crests coming in because as technology develops, you shift from one technology paradigm to another technology paradigm. And if you look at the effects, you can look at this particular paper also. I'm quoting from that paper. It is surprising actually. Our results reveal that on average, countries have adopted technologies 45 years after their invention. There is substantial variation across technologies and countries. Newer technologies have been adopted faster than old ones. The cross-country variation in the adoption of technologies accounts for at least 25% of per capita income differences. Just read that once more, you will understand the implications. It's very, very important because the way technology diffuses is actually deciding the way countries progress. We all know it for sure, but this is actually coming up with numbers. And the funny thing is, in their particular study, they came up with this figure. Look at that. Countries have adopted technologies 45 years after their invention. And the first is that adoption lags are large, vary a lot. This is also important. The standard deviation is 39 years. Most of this variation is due to technology-specific variation, which contributes more than half of the variance of adoption lags in our sample. Over the 2 centuries for which we have data, the average adoption lag across countries for new technologies has steadily declined. That is, newer technologies are having bigger acceptance. Just look at the way we have embraced internet. Earlier, we had actually almost 100 years of the telephone and telegraphs. But how much reach had it in India? Now, since 2000s, how much reach has internet actually got in our country? Unimaginable. The rates of adoption, the rates of technology diffusion has actually totally changed. Now, again, we will be interested in finding out whether you can represent diffusion as a function of so many variables. That is D equal to F of something, something, etc. Because again, in academics, we are very interested in understanding these things. And in the real world, firms also try to understand how these functional relationships are there. Now, one thing is, firm size turns out to be a very commonly explored variable. And if you go through the literature, you will find that firm size is actually very important. One thing is that it is easy to study also. Please go through this later on. I'm moving on to the next one. And you will also see that suppliers are frequently responsible for facilitating the flow of information about new technology and more generally for marketing it. That is, suppliers and the supply of information is also actually driving the diffusion. And suppliers are also interesting because they are often key players in the competition between new technology and the older existing technology. Now, in some cases, they control both technologies, while in others, different groups of suppliers champion the different technologies. For example, you can think about our old CDs and DVDs. Philips was on one side, Sony was on another. They had all their disputes. They had so many formats coming in, the old CD, then the Blu-ray discs, and things like that. This is how actually suppliers also come into picture and actually change the way technology diffuses. And further on, new technology is unlikely to arrive on the market in its final form, and technological expectations are likely to have a major impact on diffusion. So the actual application of the particular technology also is driving the diffusion. And another thing worth mentioning is costs are also extremely important. And fundamentally, the fact is that most innovations fail, and it seems reasonable to insist that any serious model of diffusion ought to include failure as a possible outcome. And when we discuss innovation, we should also keep in mind that a number of innovations actually do not exist for long periods. Some of them actually fail, and diffusion modeling should also take this into account. So these are some of the factors which we actually see when we study diffusion models. And when we look at how innovation and technology development is carried out, the basic sciences, the research is actually blue sky research. It happens more in universities and research institutes, and some of the large corporations also actually do such kind of research. You would all have heard of the earlier Thomas J. Watson Center of Research of IBM. It's not that now. It has been taken over by Lucent Technologies. Just like that, Palo Alto Center of Xerox was one of the basic research centers earlier which existed and which threw up a number of patents. And some such examples are there, but mostly basic research is carried out by universities and research institutes. And on the applied side, you have feasibility aspects coming into play. Now you have the larger corporations playing a part, and the actual technology development also happening because of these feasibility studies. And these firms actually come up with technology demonstrators, then systems are developed. Excuse me. And you have the production prototypes and commercialization happening, which is all in the realm of corporate R&D. And finally, you have the products on the market contributing to the sales revenue. This is the basic model on which this kinds of innovation and technology development happens in the real world. And another question. Now, we are all familiar with the QWERTY keypad. Actually, in front of me also, a QWERTY keypad is provided on my laptop. Now, I hope everybody knows about this. The question is it a very good design? Are there no other designs of keypads? Because this actually shows how technology growth happens. See the answer to that. QWERTY was actually used not to improve the typing, but to slow the typist down. That is a funny thing. And even now, although the technologies which required the typist to be slow has been totally changed, we still persist with our old QWERTY. A funny thing indeed. Now, when you look at technology diffusion, the main elements of technology diffusion are an innovation or new idea that is communicated through certain channels over time and in a timely manner and among members of a particular social system. It can be an organization. It's also a social system. And the amount of information diffusion in a firm greatly influences the innovativeness and rate of adoption in the particular organization. And diffusion is based on the organization's willingness to act on opportunities as they become evident. And these opportunities emerge from the organization's boundary spanners. These are the individuals, that is, who are the boundary spanners. These are the individuals who interact with and gather information from the external environment. And we should all be aware that technology diffusion is closely related to innovation and transfer of technology. The process of technology transfer by acceptance of innovation on wider scale facilitates for the better returns to the owner or the supplier of technology. And if you look at the national level, it is more relevant to publicly funded R&D organizations and academic institutions which are generally engaged in basic and applied research. And in India, the attempts have been many to diffuse inventions, innovations, and technologies generated in national or publicly funded R&D organizations and academic institutions. It has been through technology transfer agents. Other channels of communication have been used. Particular special purpose vehicles themselves have been formed to do these things. And there are different approaches. That is what I wanted to highlight. Now, another small break. I will ask you all to look around the room you are in. Make a small list of items that are actually part of a technology growth story that is unveiling before you. Try to come up with loose ends and come up with some ideas on the evolution you see in these artifacts. At the outset, I had asked you to list out 2 technologies. I hope some of you have come up with those. One was to list a particular technology which you use a lot, but about the technology of which you don't have much knowledge. Another, which you use very sparingly, but which you are very much aware of how it has developed, how it is going to develop, etc., etc. Can somebody come up with a response? Can somebody come up with a response, please?
So,
Yes,
hello?
please.
So first one, I think it's my perception. Internet, which we use quite a lot, but we don't know much about its evolution.
Very good.
Evolution in the sense that it's how it's been developed, so complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So your field you are working in.
Economics, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, what about the other thing?
Other thing, something like gas stove, gas we use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is your LPG stove.
Yes, sir.
You are very much aware of the technology there.
Not much, but I'm answering to that particular question that we use, but we have some idea
Okay.
how it functions.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, you can also look at the chat box. So there are a lot of
yes, yeah. Because I was present, I was not able to.
Cited by the participants.
Thank you. I see. Basi sir has come up with Google search and SPSS for data analysis. Okay. Then Satish sir has electric fans and chairs. Okay, very good, sir. And then we have mobile phones. We use a lot, but we actually don't know much about the technology. That is the Mr. Mani Tyagi. Okay, thank you, sir. Then Ms. Sridevi has listed various kinds of online meetings, Google Meets, etc., etc. Okay. There's quite a lot. Thank you, Ritesh, sir, for pointing it out. Anyway, but actually, this is highlighting the diffusion process in action. Now, what kind of technology will persist, say, 10 years from now, of which you don't know much about? Can you predict now? It becomes a very difficult thing. So unless you are aware of the actual state of the technology, you cannot actually predict how it will shift in the coming years. So that is why diffusion is very important. Actually, if you ask the same question in a firm, probably to somebody in their R&D, you will be really surprised at the answers. If we get time, I will try to provide another view of that later. Let us get back to our story, because I have to finish by 4 o'clock. Okay. I hope you have all come up with this list also. I'll take it up a bit later. Now, even in 1960s, when a lot of research was being done in the UN level and by the OECD countries of looking at technology, some of the conclusions they have come up with are important even now. For example, in OECD's Gaps in Technology report of 1968, it's a very good report. It is available on the net, freely available. It states, while technological achievement is related to income levels across countries, the nature of this relationship differs depending upon the dimension of technology being examined. That is one conclusion. And the second one is, while technological achievement tends to rise with income, it tends to level off. The third one is, the pace at which technology spreads between countries is accelerating. And they have also given one figure, whereas a new technology in the 1800s could take as long as 100 years to reach 80% of the world's countries. For a new technology to reach 80% of the world's countries now takes less than 20 years. Here, Pareto's law coming into picture, I think, 80-20. No? Okay. And technological achievement within countries can vary widely. Despite the level of technological achievement in major cities that can rival that in high-income countries, low levels of technological advancement in rural areas mean that, viewed as a whole, countries like China and India are not particularly technologically advanced. That was the view in 1970s. Even now, we have pockets of very high technology, but also rural areas where technology has nowhere penetrated. And however, what matters most for technological achievement is the speed with which technology spreads within a country. That is extremely important. And changes in the regulatory environment and in the nature of technologies partly explain the acceleration in the rate at which they penetrate into developing countries. Mind you, this was said in 1968. Even now, this is one of the guiding lights for our policy making. And before I move on, let me have a small Now, what is the necessity for technology diffusion? One thing is, a well-managed diffusion system will allow the industry ecosystem to reap the benefits of investment, both public as well as private, on the technology development front by organizations devoted to such R&D. And there can be governmental policy initiatives, regulatory shifts, legislations that can lead to accelerated technology transfers and diffusion. For example, the case of electric vehicles. Here, the government itself is trying to diffuse the technology to the maximum extent possible through regulatory shifts. The policy initiative itself has earmarked particular deadline for shifting to that particular technology, which means others will have to follow suit. The recent change into BS6 from BS4, again, regulatory shifts is driving the technology shift, and which automatically leads to technology diffusion. These are all examples. Yes, you can look at it later. This will actually help you to understand where the focus is at each stage of the technology life cycle. For example, if you look at the communication aspect, at the startup side, you are looking more at the opportunity generation and informational content. But when the particular technology reaches the maturity level, the communication aspect should be focused on the production processes for efficiency, and you should be able to communicate the trends in changes. So like that, you can have a look at it later. Now, we again should be able to look at technology diffusion from different angles, because this helps to understand actually what happens, how it happens, etc. So one traditional perspective is that innovation and diffusion are separate processes. Diffusion is actually marketing of technology beyond initial target market. That is one way. Strategically lacking in employee involvement. That is, you have divergent views. So traditionally, innovation is something which is quite different from diffusion. And if you take the adoption perspective, communication channels and modes influence potential customers. So these can be used as tools. And from the adoption perspective, you are able to address a diversity in customers. And you are able to introduce feedback about customer needs in the diffusion process itself. Because you are speaking about adoption, you can introduce a feedback about the customer needs. And the third perspective is the technological perspective of technology diffusion. Here, the focus is on technical skills and tools for using innovative ideas. It looks at the understanding of the technology provider about the user and the environment. And if you come to the infrastructure perspective, it sees infrastructure of the region targeted as the core. And it thinks about the constraints in infrastructure, which is actually deciding the diffusion of that technology. And it can involve a combination of agents or actors, including the government, policymakers, and then customers. Now, another perspective is regulatory or societal perspective. There, you are thinking about the effects of governmental policies, bureaucratic processes, and development stage of area in which technology is intended to be used. And here, you also have the intellectual property rights aspect coming into play because of the regulatory perspective you are taking. And there is another complicated perspective, which is termed models perspective, which is actually thinking about technology diffusion only through actual theoretical models like Goldman model, Dodd model, or the Mahajan and Schumann model, etc. You have a number of models which are theoretical in nature. And if you are interested, you can also form your own comprehensive perspective, which takes the best from all these perspectives and come up with a new one. And this actually values innovation in totality. Now, the power of information is something we should all be aware of. This is a quote from Third Wave, a very good book of Toffler. What does it say? In 1955, as the second wave crested in the United States, the Hoover Commission peeked inside the files of three major corporations. It discovered respectively 34,000, 56,000, and 64,000 documents and memos on file for each employee on the payroll. We are interested on the information side of this. So a company could find all this information about their employees is something really wonderful. What kind of information is something else. Now, innovation diffusion is exactly about information and the transmission of information. And the adopter characteristics that actually affect the purchase of a new product will actually include the adopter class, the risk disposition, the geo-demographics, the economic value need, and also the word of mouth behavior. And the innovation characteristics can include relative advantage, relative cost price, perceived usefulness, ease of use, network externalities, etc. And the firm characteristics comprise firm size, firm marketing efforts, and firm reputation. Environment characteristics that drive new product trials and repeat purchases include infrastructure, availability and demand for related products, and market conditions. Actually, when you study innovation, these are all the factors which you should be actually looking into. Now, again, Rogers' theory of innovation diffusion, or this diffusion of innovations, actually comes up with some of the characteristics which determine an innovation's rate of adoption. These are the relative advantage, the compatibility, complexity, the adaptedness to trials, the observability to those people within the social system. And if the time dimension is involved, one thing is you have something called an innovation decision process coming into play. And it is the mental process through which an individual, it can be another decision making unit also, because if you are dealing with firms, you have decision making units also coming into play, passes from the first knowledge of an information to forming an attitude towards the innovation, to a decision to adopt or reject, to implementation of the new idea, and to confirmation of this decision. This is the innovation decision process. This actually plays a big role in the diffusion of innovation. And here, time is a big factor also. Now, the 5-step process in innovation decision making, again, let us look at it. The 5 steps are: you have to have some knowledge, then you should be persuaded, you have to come up with a decision, and decisions should be implemented, and finally, you should have a confirmation. That is, the person evaluates the results of an innovation decision already made. That is the confirmation stage. If the innovation diffusion is to be a chain-like thing, this 5-step process should happen again and again, so that what should happen? The innovators now give the idea to the early adopters, and the early adopters give the idea to the early majority, so on and so forth. So you have your diffusion curve coming in like this. If you look at the adoption rate, this is the famous diffusion curve of Rogers. You have the innovators, 2.5% of the adopter category. Then you have the early adopters forming 13.5% roughly. Then you have the early majority and the late majority taking up 68%. That is the majority actually. Then you have the laggards. Actually, they lag behind in technology adoption. And in between, you will note that I have shown this portion as a chasm. This is the famed chasm. That is, if a technology does not shift from early adopters to the early majority fast enough, then the possibility of that technology taking off is getting reduced. So all technology diffusion efforts are to bridge this chasm. And as far as possible, if you are able to innovate fast, transfer to early adopters, and transfer to the majority, then you will have a mature technology running on for so many years. And again, the way the technology is actually taken up by each of these categories is also related to the values they associate. For example, innovators are venturesome. Early adopters, they always value respectability, whereas the early majority always value deliberate decision making, and the late majority are the skeptical ones, while the laggards are the traditional ones. This I have taken from Rogers. This is the way he has actually come up with the value systems associated with each of these classes. Now, the third way in which time is involved in diffusion is in the rate of adoption. The rate of adoption is the relative speed with which an innovation is adopted by members of a social system. And the rate of adoption is usually measured as the number of members of the system that adopt the innovation in a given time period. And innovation's rate of adoption is influenced by the 5 perceived attributes of an innovation. Now, when we look at innovation diffusion, we should also be aware of technology assimilation. I was just looking at another paper from Zhu et al. And this is about a very interesting topic now, e-business. But they looked at that in 2006, almost 15 years back. So if you look at the research at that time, what did they say about e-business? This is what they said. Competition positively affects initiation and adoption, but negatively impacts routinization as firms chase new technologies without learning to use available ones. So this is what may happen. And this is actually what has happened in e-business. And large firms have an advantage of resources in the initiation stage, but inertia makes them lag. Again, this is what we have seen in the e-business avenue. And regulatory environment plays a more important role in developing countries. Exactly what we have found in the case of developing countries. Another thing they have found out is technology readiness is the strongest factor in developing countries, but technology integration is the most important in developed ones. So at that time, e-business was relatively new, and they found that technology readiness (TR) is the strongest factor in developing countries, whereas in developed ones, technology integration, that is, you integrate it with existing applications. So more and more people actually catch up with that technology. That is more important in developed ones. So this is how you actually put into use your diffusion theory and study something. Now again, when we say all these things, we should also be aware of the other opinions. This is from Christensen again, and he has mentioned the case of digital equipment, Input Digital Equipment Corporation. We will all be familiar with the name DEC, especially those who are in computers in behind that is in the 1980s and 90s. This will be a familiar name. Just excuse me. Now, what is this that we see here? You see, the author proceeded to warn IBM to watch out because it was standing on the tracks of the juggernaut called Digital Equipment Corporation. And Digital was one of the most prominently featured companies in the McKinsey study that led to the book In Search of Excellence. Again, a very good book, In Search of Excellence. Now, why I am quoting this here is, look at this. This is about the same Digital Equipment Corporation, which was highlighted like this: 7.6 billion computer maker has been gathering speed, etc., etc. And what has happened 2 years down the line? See this: cost cutting hasn't come close to restoring profitability. So what has happened? This is what happens when actually companies or firms do not actually assimilate technologies. In the case of Digital Equipment Corporation, what happened was they did not focus on the personal computers as much as they should have. They were more interested in mini computers. But the time of PC was around the corner, and IBM cashed in on that. They came up with their IBM PC, which was revolutionizing the way people took to computers. And they managed to catch the biggest market available at that time. And another sad thing is you don't have IBM in computers now. They are only into the big ones. Now you don't have your PCs made of IBM. So that is the way technology diffuses. You have other companies coming in and taking up the technology from where the big players left it. Now, a new technology may be introduced amid great enthusiasm and enjoy widespread initial acquisition, but nevertheless still fails to be thoroughly deployed among many acquiring firms. Now, can anybody remember the personal digital assistants and digital diaries, which we used to carry some 15 years back with pride? Nobody even thinks about those things now. The digital diaries and all those things. With your smartphone coming into picture, all that has got relegated to the corners of your almirah. Another example of radical innovation. The question is when we should think about radical innovation. When is incremental innovation dominant, and when do radical changes in technology appear? Another paper highlights this, and they highlight about the successful ascent of Microsoft's spreadsheet software Excel to market domination. Now, Excel, MS Excel, which we all play with almost every day, was introduced in 1985. But those who have used computers in the 1990s will remember the Lotus spreadsheets. Now, does anybody even remember the name Lotus 123? I don't think anybody will know. Of the new generation, they will ask us, what is this Lotus? So that is the shift in technology which has happened. So from dominating the spreadsheet market in the 1980s, what has happened is Microsoft Excel has wiped out everything else. This is the innovation decision process of Rogers. It is actually the step-by-step approach to innovation decision making, which requires knowledge, persuasion, decision, implementation, and confirmation. This is what we have discussed a bit earlier. And under each of these parameters, some more characteristics are given, how it is actually influencing the innovation decision process. You can have a look at it later. And the two aspects which we should keep in mind is the know why and the know how in technology diffusion. Adoption of complex technology by firms get delayed until they obtain sufficient technical know how to implement and operate it successfully. And such barriers have led to the creation of institutions like consultancies. Actually, this is one of the reasons why you have consultancies coming into play. And adoption is primarily the outcome of a learning or communications process is the core to traditional diffusion studies. It emphasizes demand for an innovation and assumes that everyone has an equal opportunity to adopt, limited only by their innovativeness. Here, there is too much focus on demand side and not enough on the supply side institutions of diffusion. A small break. Just look at a few slides which will show you how to innovate. Okay, coming back. Another picture. What is it that they are carrying on a cycle? Can anybody tell me? Can anyone tell me?
Sir, it's a rocket.
It's part of a rocket. So just imagine. It is actually part of a rocket being carried on a bicycle. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first part of the rocket that was taken by the famous scientist.
Yes. Our dear past president would have mentioned about this in his book also, I think. That is at Tumba. Okay, now look at the other. Sorry. Sorry for that. Maybe I skipped that. Okay. Look at that picture on the right. This is the present state of India's space program. From here to here, this is what technology is all about. Also, this is what we will call it as appropriate technology. Why they used a bicycle was it was not easy at that time. Tumba, this is Tumba. Tumba was just being that is preparations were going on for building things and things like that. But still, they were doing their research. This is part of a sounding rocket, which were the first to be launched from India at the time from Tumba, TERS. And this is our GSLV lifting off. So technology development really in action. Now let us look at some of the academic parts also. And one paper which looks at the organizational learning for technology diffusion. We have been discussing about the different factors, the different methods through which technology diffuses. And closely we have looked at Rogers' theory of diffusion. And now, there can be two different types of communication involved in the diffusion process. That is what Atwell says in this paper of technology diffusion and organizational learning. One is signaling versus the second one is know-how or technical knowledge. And implementing a complex new technology requires both individual and organizational learning. So this is what he has to say. What is striking about the computer revolution was the emergence of institutional arrangements that removed a large part of the burden of knowledge acquisition from the backs of potential users and enabled a relatively complex technology to diffuse rapidly into firms that initially lacked expert knowledge and did not employ in-house specialists. So this is one way of circumventing organizational issues when high technology diffuses throughout. So this is one finding of that paper, which is even now very relevant. I have a small video which again will highlight another aspect of technology. This is all available in the net. Please look at that. It is the Apollo 12 mission, not the first mission. This is the next one. Why I showed this particular video is you would have noticed at the start what happened to the launch vehicle.
Struck by lightning.
Yeah, it was struck by lightning. And how were they able to circumvent that? only because of the presence of mind of one of the crew members who had actually learned about the technology behind that. Otherwise, the whole mission would have been lost. So that is one aspect. And if you look at the dates, you would remember it is in the 1960s, end 1960s or 1969. And how many lunar missions have since then happened? It is another question we should keep in mind. So this was a real quantum jump in technology, which actually cannot have any precedence before that. Probably the atomic explosions may be comparable, but it is quite different aspects of technology which play a role in furthering particular technologies. And if you look at the technology which have all gone into such a space exploration and nuclear experiments, etc., you will find that they all lead to a lot of spin-offs. That is exactly how technology grows. So such big projects on the side, they also help in the growth of technology. That is why I wanted to highlight that. And when we look at diffusion, another aspect we have to keep in mind is how do we study technology diffusion? So we should all be aware of indicators. I understand there is one class on technology indicators also. Probably that will be dealing with it in a more detailed fashion. But we should be aware that the more frequently a certain pattern is cited by subsequent patterns, the more the related technology can be said to be diffused. This is one way of looking at it, implying that technology is more widely applied and thus more valuable. So this is again IPR coming into picture when you look at technology diffusion. And among the many technology forecasting indicators, patterns are a mature and objective indicator. So the more frequently a certain pattern is cited by subsequent patterns, the more the related technology can be said to be diffused, implying that the technology is more widely applied and thus more valuable. And if you okay. And you will be wondering about the applicability of diffusion theory into such studies of technology. This is another paper which is about telemedicine, which is nowadays having a lot of attention. So what does that particular paper, which was in 2005, we discussed 3 Indian telemedicine implementation cases, consolidate lessons learned from the cases, and accumulate with the potential researchable critical success factors. So this is another facet of diffusion theory study. So they have come up with conclusion: telemedicine can open a world of healthcare delivery by building clinical bridges between patients and available healthcare, albeit contingent upon the cost and development of ancillary infrastructure and services. Mind you, this was 15 years back. And now we are direly in need of such networks. And again, we had a beginning in telemedicine in the 1980s, actually. So this is another area where you can apply diffusion theory, studying the result of technology changes. Another paper, understanding the blockchain technology adoption in supply chains, Indian context. Again, I quote from this paper. In this paper, we advance the literature on blockchain technology, BT, and its adoption in the supply chain by developing and statistically validating a model for understanding the user perception on BT adoption. The model is based on the integration of 3 adoption theories: TAM, TRI, and the theory of planned behavior. This is one of the preliminary studies on BT adoption in supply chain, and the findings imply that the supply chain practitioners perceive BT adoption free of efforts and would help them to derive maximum benefits for improving the supply chain effectiveness. Again, the basic concepts of diffusion of technology has been applied to come up with some valid results for furthering technology. So this is another way of applying diffusion theory. And now when you look at global technology diffusion, I'm taking from the paper of Keller. International technology diffusion is important because it determines the pace at which the world's technology frontier may expand in future. This is exactly what we were looking at when we were watching that particular video. And trade and interaction with multinationals may thus lead not only to technology diffusion of the limited kind, but it may also raise the probability of international R&D spillovers. So this is another aspect of global technology diffusion. More globalized the trade becomes, you have more exposure. That is, the probability of getting international R&D spillovers increase. For a country like India, this is extremely valuable. And how do you measure the state of technology in a country? Three widely used indirect approaches are to measure the inputs, the outputs, and the effect of technology. Inputs through R&D spending, outputs through the patents and the citable literature. The effect of technology is through the higher productivity. That is, economists will say something about the TFR and things like that, total factor productivity and all those things. And another important aspect which we should be aware of when we are studying technology diffusion is, will ethnic scientific communities, for example, we have a lot of Indians in the US, and US is trying to send back the Chinese people working in their research labs and things like that. Actually, is there any influence of these ethnic scientific communities in international technology diffusion? That is another very valid question. And this paper in 2008 provides some answers. The international diffusion of new innovations from frontier countries is necessary for broad economic growth. Successful transfer, however, is complicated by the difficult dissemination of the codified and tacit knowledge necessary for adoption. So this is exactly why not everywhere technology has taken off. Probably this is one of the stronger areas of India, because here we have been able to convert the codified and tacit knowledge necessary for adopting newer technologies. And I'll be concluding with a few recaps of the technology adoption models. As many in the academics will already be aware of, there are a number of models which highlight technology adoption through diffusion of technologies. One is technology readiness, refers to people's propensity to embrace and use new technologies for accomplishing goals at home and at work. Parshuraman and Colby's paper in 2001. And they have further classified technology consumers into 5 technology readiness segments of explorers, pioneers, skeptics, paranoids, and laggards. Something similar to what we have seen in diffusion of innovation theory of Rogers. Another model is the task technology fit model of Goodhue in 1995, where you have task characteristics and technology characteristics. And these are put together in a task technology fit match, and you evaluate through performance and utilization levels. This is another model. A very commonly used model for technology adoption studies is Adkins' theory of planned behavior, where you have attitude, perceived behavioral control, all influencing intention and the actual behavior through subjective norms also. Another very much used model is the TAM, or the technology acceptance model of Venkatesh and Davis, where although it looks simple, it is not so simple. You have perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use, contributing to the behavior intention in actually adopting a particular technology, which leads to the usage behavior. Another particular model which is being used nowadays by many of the academic researchers is TAM2, where the earlier TAM model has been expanded, and you have some more perceptive norms coming into play. That is job relevance, output quality, result demonstratability, etc., adding on to the perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use in the earlier TAM model. Another very commonly used model is the UT-AUT model put forth by Venkatesh et al., which again focuses on the use behavior of technology through the behavioral intention, the modulating parameters here is gender, age, experience, voluntariness of use, etc., performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, facilitating conditions, etc. Actually, this model has been further developed, and now all this is about actual models which can be used in our studies. Now, when we apply it into real technology studies, what happens? One study which I have taken, this is from Usha Rao and Kishore's paper on review of technology diffusion models with special reference to renewable energy technologies. Very important topic nowadays. Now, what do they say? Diffusion of renewable energy technologies are driven by policies and incentives due to their inherent characteristics such as high upfront costs, lack of level playing field, but distinct advantages from energy security, environmental and social considerations. The question we should ask is, can diffusion model be directly applied here? So what do they say? Their applications are focused on commercial and consumer products, so and so. Then diffusion analysis of RETs have been based on barriers to RET adoption and techno-economic learning and experience curve approaches. It is observed that these diffusion models, when applied to commercial products, do not deal with the issues of policy influences which are critical to RET diffusion. Since policies drive RET diffusion, the models for analyzing RET diffusion should allow establishing explicit relationships between the diffusion parameters and policies and their impact on diffusion rates. What I wanted to suggest is, when you apply such modeling theories, that is diffusion theory, it may be very valid for a particular technology, but you should also take into account other factors, just like policy here, which they have highlighted is missing out in some of the earlier studies. I will give a small exercise. It's already 4 o'clock. Sorry for. Okay. Probably this can be done as an exercise later on also. I will upload this. All of you may please go through this. I have 2 curves given here. These are some of the questions you are supposed to answer. So thank you all for your patient listening, interactions and involvement. I hope I have kept to the time.
Sir, there are some questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So first question is from Subhaya. How can a technology be categorized as disruptive? Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, thank you. When the question is when a technology can be taken to be disruptive.
Yeah.
Okay. When we look at the traditional way of looking at technologies through the S-curves, it becomes a big problem because many of the technologies which have been disruptive in the real sense do not really show up early on. That is one big problem. For example, nobody could have predicted that Facebook or WhatsApp would happen and we will all be getting on board that so fast. Actually, many of the earlier forms of communication have been at the receiving end because of the popularity of these. So one way to look at it is to look at the development of such related technologies. And if you remember, I had shown that the performance curves of disruptive technologies may not be very high in the initial stages, but they will pick up very fast due to the very fast acceptance by majority of users. That is what happens with disruptive technology. So possibly if we can trace the curve of evolution, you will find that disruptive technologies have a number of applications coming fast. That will lead to the disruption of the earlier technologies. Actually, you will be having more on that through the technology forecasting class. There is one session on technology forecasting, if I remember right.
Okay, sir. Next question is, sir, is setting regulatory standards for products such as mobiles indicative of dominant designs?
Regulatory standards are usually put forth when a particular technology is starting to mature. So indirectly, it shows that the dominant design has already happened. Because unless that dominant design is already acceptable, the regulatory standards will have to completely shift. For example, the work of IEEE in coming up with standardization early on when the technology itself is developing, those familiar with that particular field in computer networks and in electrical systems, they will understand. So it is in a way indicative.
Okay, sir. I think it's already over. Sir, it's my duty to propose vote of thanks. Sir, on behalf of all the participants of FDP, I express sincere thanks for such an informative session. You gave an in-depth knowledge in diffusion and growth of technology and how we apply diffusion models in real technology scenario with so many visual examples and graphical representation as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Vinod. It was a nice session, very informative, and we enjoyed. See you tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow it will be starting at 9 o'clock.
Thank you,
All
Basu sir.
participants.